Hello, everybody, and welcome to the summer school series of Macro Pro and Friends. And today I am delighted because one of my friends, my real friends, is here with us today, Leslie Dilbeck. Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see all the attendees' names because I recognize a lot of you guys. So super excited.
Yeah, there are a lot of our clients that are online today, and it is exciting to see that. Now, you just got back from vacation. So where did you go?
I was in Jacksonville, Florida. We are Dave Matthews Band groupies. So we had 2 nights of concerts in the heat and humidity of Florida, but it was a blast.
Oh, that is cool. Well, my twin sister lives in Florida, so I know what you're talking about. She does share about that humidity. So I'm wondering, for our audience, what are your summer plans for this year? If you want to just put that in the question box, put it in there so we can see what you have planned, because it's always fun to see what other people are doing. So the whole reason we're doing this summer series is so that people can catch up on their CEUs for the year. You know that you have to record them in July. In July. So we are trying to make sure you get them. At this point, there are about 12 classes. We're added a couple new ones yesterday. So be sure to check the Macro Pro website so that you can see what those are. You will get 1 CEU credit for this class. And you should receive your certificate within 1 hour. If you don't, please give it a little bit longer because it's probably a firewall. You do need to be logged into the GoToWebinar platform. So that means you've got to be able to see Leslie or I. If you just simply phone in, your time and attendance will not be noted. So please make sure that you have logged on. All right, so if you have any questions for Leslie, you can put them in the question box. Oh, and Leslie, in a second, read where people are going, okay? Because that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking right now.
So Leslie has stats today, so they are attached to this webinar. So make sure that you download them. Okay, so what do you see, Leslie? Where are our friends going?
Somebody, Catalina's going to Cancun. Valentina's camping in Washington. Maybe she'll be up near you.
Oh, please come to me. Maybe it'll be close to me.
A couple of Yosemite folks. Good job, Yosemite. I lived in, well, let's see. Oh, a lot of, and a 3-day cruise, travel, softball, Sacramento heat. That's just classic. I get that.
Yeah. Oh, somebody's going to New York. That's always fun to go to New York. I love going to New York.
Going to the coast. So I like that. My inner mermaid is excited for you.
Oh, Gwen's going to Italy. Oh, yeah, a lot of you said
somebody Italy. Said they just got back from an Alaskan cruise. I'm doing that at the end of August, so maybe I need to get some pointers.
Well, mine's not in the summer, but I'm going to the Galapagos next February. That'll be exciting. All right, well, Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you. As exciting and fun it is to see what everybody's doing, and it's always great. Let's go ahead and start our educational portion of that. We're going to do AMA Guides 101. Again, if you have any questions for Leslie, put it into the box, and at the end, if we have time, we'll answer them. If not, I will email your questions to Leslie so that she has them. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Just to make sure and clarify, just let me know you can see my screen okay, and we will get started because I think I'm sharing. I believe I'm sharing. All right.
You're sharing.
Awesome. So we are calling this AMA Guides 101. The whole title of it really is Impairment to Permanent Disability in California, but Macro Pro loves themes. So I had to do AMA Guides 101 so that you would feel comfortable with, this whole little school classroom setting that we're doing. Just a little bit about me. My name is Leslie Dilbeck. I'm Vice President and one of the partners at iRatings. We have a few different raters. We have claims experience. We've been nerding out on the AMA Guides myself for about 20 years. We're certified experts in impairment and disability ratings. We do a lot of work with many of you that I see online. Oh, I see you, Magda. Thank you. What we do, just in case you don't know what iRatings is we look at the doctor's report to validate the impairment rating. I'm going to share some statistics with you in a little bit to help you understand that the doctors are not always right. And I think you probably know that, but you might be astonished to know how often they are wrong. So we review the medical reports, we do independent ratings, looking to see if the impairment rating as assigned by the evaluator is supported by the evidence. And if it's not, we tell our client, here's what the corrected rating is. Meaning, if you were to have the best case scenario, this is what the permanent disability exposure should be. But what we do is we go through and we provide a critique of the doctor's report. And really, it's kind of like, poking holes in the doctor's report can be one way of looking at it, or clarifying might be another way of looking at it. And so we look at this from the foundational concepts of the AMA guides, looking at what the different methodologies are, what the different rules are and requirements are to get an accurate impairment rating. And then, of course, what's most important to you is you want to know, how much money am I going to pay on this case? And so we will tell you, if worst case scenario, you did nothing at all, you didn't get the doctor to change their opinion, it would be this much permanent disability after age and occupation based on the whole person impairment values assigned by the evaluator. If it were best case scenario and you got the doctor to correct the error of their ways, this is what after age and occupation, these whole person impairment values would basically equate to as far as permanent disability is concerned. Noticing here, this particular sample I'm showing you, 38% permanent disability, uncorrected, worst case scenario versus best case scenario, 14% permanent disability. So let's talk about what we're going to be looking at today. I think it's important for me to tell you where we're going and how we're going to get there, so that you can be engaged. And I may ask you some questions as well, because I know that we can have challenges when we're doing web-based training, and that you probably are getting like little bings on your email or your chat messenger from your coworkers. But I really want to encourage you to take this time today for your own professional development, and also for you to just kind of see if what you believe to be true about the AMA guides is accurate, or maybe finding some new nuggets or pearls of wisdom that you walk away with that you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I didn't ever think about it that way. So use this time for you, all right? So goals for today's training. We're going to talk about the difference between impairment versus disability. We're going to explore the concept of MMI, maximum medical improvement. Overview of the AMA guides and impairment. We're going to just kind of briefly look at like where the impairment rating is nestled within a medical report. We're going to look at our schedule in California, recognizing that we have the schedule we have to look at in order to figure out permanent disability exposure. And we're going to look at error rates and some briefly talk about common errors and strategies to correct those errors. I know you're probably thinking, how is she going to do that in 1 hour? But I promise you, I will. And let's just say 50 minutes, okay? So impairment and disability are two very different concepts. Usually in my trainings, I'll like walk around the audience and ask people what they think impairment is versus disability. But I'm going to just be straightforward with you right now to tell you they are two different concepts that kind of hold hands, okay? In our system, they do hold hands. So impairment is a medical determination. When we look at what the AMA guides say about it on page 2 of that big green book, it means loss of use of a derangement or derangement of any body part, system, or function. So think of it this way. If you have your index finger amputated and there's no reattaching it, let's say it's gone for good, right? Maybe you were a carpenter and you sliced it clear off. You are no longer 100% whole, okay? I hope that makes sense. I hope people are nodding their heads. Usually when I'm doing this training in a different platform, I ask you to drop me an emoji, but I don't think you guys have the opportunity to do that necessarily in this format. But if you get it, you don't have an index finger, you're no longer 100% whole. Now let's talk about disability. That is defined on page 8 of that big green book as an alteration of an individual's capacity to meet personal, social, or occupational demands because of their impairment. So think of it this way. Your index finger is gone. Now what can't you do because your index finger is gone? That's what disability is. And these become challenging concepts for our medical providers, our practitioners, because sometimes they want the impairment to equate to what they believe the disability is for the individual. And that's not what they are called to do. They're called to provide an unbiased assessment of what the impairment is. And then we have in California and other jurisdictions schedules or models that impairment value is assigned to capture what that permanent disability is. So we know impairment's pretty objective, pretty straightforward. Index finger is gone. All right, cool. We know that they're not going to be back to 100% whole because that is no longer existent. But now we get into this real mushy scenario of, well, what's their disability? Well, one person may say, oh, I do everything without my index finger. I'm totally fine, no problem. But then you might have another person say, oh my gosh, I can't even move my arm now because I don't have my index finger. We see these challenges. We recognize disability is somewhat subjective. It's very subjective, quite honestly, because it's the person's perception and their willingness to adapt to figure out what that loss of that index finger means to them on a social level, occupationally, and from a functional level. So that's the difference between these two concepts. And I think it's important to recognize that because that's one of the challenges within our system is providers trying to make them match up. And that's what we had happen with the Alvarez-Guzman decision, which some of you may not be aware of, but most of you should know. And I'm not going to go deep dive into that. That's a whole nother training if you're interested. Okay, so when is impairment determined? Let me just give you a little background on myself before we go into this. When I first started in claims, I did not know I was going to grow up and be an expert on the AMA guides, okay? In college, I didn't even know that I was going to be a claims examiner at an insurance company in San Diego. I had a degree in speech communications, not like speech pathology, literally speech communications. That's how I put myself through college. I got a degree in speech communications, which means I competed on the speech and debate team, traveled to many cool colleges, won lots of big trophies, which I just moved from California to Nevada, had to get rid of the big trophies, just kept the little placard pieces of it. So going back to that time, and if you have been in claims for more than 20 years, maybe even as long as me, 30, you get this scenario. I answered an ad in the paper to be a claims examiner trainee, a CET. All I knew is that, hey, the pay sounded great. I needed to pay off my school loans. I was hired. I didn't know what workers' comp was. I didn't know what insurance was. I didn't know what claims was. They put me on a desk of 300 files. I did not know what I was doing. I did not have any clue what was supposed to be paid out on cases. I didn't know all the little vernacular. And I kept hearing this term PMS. And I'm thinking, why do they keep talking about PMS? Recognizing once I saw the medical report, it meant permanent and stationary. P and S, not premenstrual syndrome, say, or any of that. It's so, I recognized at that time very quickly that we have our own little language in workers' comp. So you're going to hear me say things like PNS, MMI, PR4, and if you're new to the system, just write it down if you don't know what the vernacular is that I'm using, and ask your coworker. It's okay to ask questions if you're new. We have a lot of new people entering our system. So I want you to feel bold and brave to ask those questions. It's okay to not know. So when is impairment determined? P and S, MMI, maximum medical improvement. And what does that mean? That means that the person, and I'm loosely giving you my Cliff Notes version of what the guides say. It basically means the person's not going to get a whole lot better or a whole lot worse over an extended period of time. Their condition has stabilized, so to speak. So you might see little ebbs and flows of the person seeming to be a bit less pain as far as pain is concerned, but maybe the next time you see the report, it seems like it's up a bit. Maybe they've got a little bit better range of motion than the last visit and then the next visit. So you kind of have to look at it not as like it's a straight line. It's going to be like a little up and down if you were to put it on a graph chart. So we look at an example of persons who's had a shoulder surgery. They would not be deemed to be at MMI until they've completed their course of physical therapy post-surgery. So what do we expect when the person's at MMI? Well, if they're in the, treater realm, they would have what's called a PR4, and that is the state form. It's a horrible form for a doctor to have to fill out and put everything that's needed, that one needs to know to determine what benefits to pay the individual. But this is the form the doctors are required to use by the state of California. So that's the final evaluation form. And so you will see some doctors just scribble scrabble on it and put their whole person impairment on it, as they deem necessary, or you might see them kind of say "see attached," and what that means is they've dictated or provided a detailed narrative report, which I think is so much better. It does a disservice to the injured worker, and it just is challenging for the claims person to have to decipher if the rating's supported or not. Now, the other scenario at MMI is maybe you're challenging the situation and saying, this person's been on TTD for a long time, or they just keep going back for visits. We need to get a med legal to determine if this person's at MMI, permanent and stationary, and ask a million other questions that you might have on the case. So we look at that, and those med legal reports usually are more verbose, a little bit more comprehensive than that nice little cute PR4 form that the treaters are required to fill out. And so we look at these forms and these medical reports, and we see what is required to determine if there is a impairment rating assigned that's supported by the evidence. So a detailed med legal report is going to have everything, and I'm going to kind of go into that a little bit more in a minute, that tells you, is the impairment rating supported or not? So when we talk about anatomy of the medical report, I'm going to go into what are the key elements as far as an impairment rating is concerned for you to focus on. But let's step back for a minute and look at the AMA guides and look at what the role of the guides are. We've been at it for about 20 years now. We used to have an old method in which we looked at work restrictions and subjective factors of disability, and every once in a while we would use objective factors of disability. Sorry, my little ADD person, my brain sees that you can drop emojis. So I'm going to ask you to drop emojis on some of these questions I ask you. Okay, going back, the AMA guide was implemented as part of a huge California work comp reform when Governor Schwarzenegger was in office. It's probably his most notable accomplishment from a good standpoint as governor. We know there's some other scandal pieces of it he'd probably not want to be recognized for. So for today, let's look at our world with a rainbow in it and a happy, unicorns and all the money on trees type scenario. Let's look at things from a positive. The glass is half full. So Governor Schwarzenegger implemented this. It was a huge reform that implemented the AMA guides because they saw they were using them in other jurisdictions, and they were recognizing there was a huge disparity in evaluators' opinions when it came down to the final permanent disability outcome in the case. So they recognized that the AMA guides are a structured approach that can promote uniformity and consistency and reliability in ratings with physicians evaluating the same patient. So the idea would be two doctors looking at the same patient within a reasonable period of time should come up with a similar rating versus the old way of doing things, which could be one doctor would say no heavy lifting work restriction, another doctor would say no very heavy lifting work restriction. Diane, somebody says they can't see the handouts or the attachments in the question box, just an FYI. So we look at the guides and we recognize, okay, well, you know, that reform was probably proper. I believe it was proper because we know that it works in other jurisdictions. It's used loosely in some jurisdictions and more strictly in others, but about 43 states make a nod or use them absolute in their work comp systems. It's also used on the federal side, Longshore and Harbor Workers Act and Federal Employee Compensation Act cases, which we also have the privilege of looking at iRatings. It's used internationally in Canada, South Africa, Australia. And we look at the fact that there's multiple editions that are provided. The 5th edition is the most widely used, although the 6th edition is the most current. But we are mandated by our statute to use the 5th edition. So now that we have this idea of impairment versus disability, what MMI is, what the role of the guides are, we have to look at what the evidence piece is to determine permanent disability payout, and that is the doctor's report. You will get doctor's reports that are super long, and I believe I have an assumption or a belief that sometimes doctors do that to charge you more money, and I don't think it's necessary. I think some of it's overkill. Certainly there are cases where it's absolutely necessary. But for most work comp cases, I mean, let's not go over 20 pages unless, and that's, you know, different if there's been a huge long medical history and there's a lot of records to review. So the doctor, if they're doing a really awesome report, should have all these elements: the history of injury, work history, present complaints, past history, medical records review, physical exam, diagnosis, bing, 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 impairment calculation. And that's probably what you honestly do when you get that medical report. You go to the very end and look at what's the PD exposure, what's the apportionment, what's my future medical care, because I need to figure out what I need to do next. I look at things from a perspective of what is supportive of an impairment rating, what validates it. There's certain things I look out for. I first, of course, look at the diagnosis just to kind of get my bearings. I know by looking at the diagnosis what I should be expecting approximately as far as an impairment rating is concerned. So like for a lumbar strain, 5 to 8% whole person impairment. If I see something outside of those parameters, I'm going to raise an eyebrow. I'm not going to say that I'm completely shutting down or invalidating the impairment rating, but now it piques my interest to dig a little bit deeper into this doctor's report. I like to then look at present complaints because that gives me some insight based on the diagnosis. Am I seeing complaints that are compatible, right? If I see lumbar strain and that's the diagnosis, and I go into current symptoms and the individual is all of a sudden like homebound, bedbound, can't lift a thing, I'm questioning that. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to invalidate the rating yet. I might question, is this person really at MMI? That's the first question I'm going to ask. Second, I'm going to ask myself, is this diagnosis correct? Is there more to it? So I'm going to look at those present complaints section because it also will help me determine if I have a range of impairment, which in the AMA guides, you will see different ranges of impairment for certain components of impairment, like for example, the lumbar strain, 5 to 8%. Well, what tells me to go 5 versus 8? It's going to be the present complaints and impact on ADLs. I see Stephanie lost audio, Diane. I don't know if it's on my end, but I'm going to keep trucking along until you come on and tell me, hey, you're not working. I looked at my internet speed. I'm zooming. So, oh, it came back on. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, activities of daily living I mentioned as a basis for determining where somebody falls within ranges of impairment. A really good doctor's report will go through each one of these, and they're basically activities that we all do as human beings, and the impact of an impairment on our ADLs may warrant a higher rating under the category range of impairment for certain conditions. So that is important to see documented within the doctor's report, and it's usually nestled within that present complaint section. But honestly, if you look at this and you see, you know, these different things they're all something that we do as human beings. So just something to be aware of. Now, my next piece is that physical examination. I, of course, have looked at the impairment rating, and now I'm going, wait, 5 to 8% is what I'm expecting for a lumbar strain, but the doctor's saying 25 to 28. What the heck is going on? So I'm going to start poking through the physical examination, and the AMA guides are super exceptional at providing doctors the rule book. It's if any of you like board games or sports, football, let's take football for example. There's definitely certain rules that have to be followed in order for a play to be made and in order for it to be successful. So it's similar to this with the guides. We see in all the chapters, they tell the doctor exactly how an exam needs to take place, what measurements need to be taken, what tools the doctor needs to use to get said measurements, and how those measurements may be applied to other components within that physical exam section. So every chapter within the 5th edition has kind of their own unique way of doing the physical exam component, and I will give you a little background on that for a brief second. I'm going to kind of go over here to the left a bit for a minute. For the 5th edition, they had multiple different evaluators or doctors or experts writing the various different chapters. So literally the hand did not know what the foot was doing. So, you know, there was a lower extremity committee, an upper extremity committee, a spine committee, a cardiopulmonary committee. So that's why you're seeing some of these inconsistencies between the way even a physical exam is done within the different chapter sections to even how the different rating processes are and methods are applied in the AMA guides. So just know that each chapter is quite different. So looking at the physical exam component for the upper extremity, we are given this really excellent recording form that that chapter committee, chapter 16, upper extremities, felt was probably something that would be helpful to the evaluator. This is figure 16-1A and B, found on pages 436 and 437 of the AMA guides. And this is a form that tells the doctor, here's what we want you to measure. Here's what body part or which region of the upper extremity we're talking about. Please also record the impairment assigned to that region or level. And then here's some other things to consider as far as motion, amputation, sensory loss, other disorders such as in the shoulder, a Mumford procedure, let's say, and then directs the doctor, combine these values, convert, then add or take to hand, but then wait till the very end and do it from hand, upper extremity to then whole person, combining all the components of that upper extremity. That's a little bit different than what we find in chapter 17. Chapter 17 actually is a little bit more user-friendly. They don't really have a recording form. The best thing I can tell you to do with respect to the lower extremity chapter is be familiar with table 17-1. It goes through all the 13 different methods by which you would rate impairment. And it's at the very beginning of chapter 17. So when you see table 17-1, the 17 means you find that in chapter 17, and that's the first table you're going to find within that chapter. And they've broken it down by 3 different types of assessment, meaning physical exam components or thoughts for assignment of impairment, anatomic, functional, and diagnosis based. So when I'm looking at an impairment rating, and let's say it's for a partial medial meniscectomy and I'm expecting a 1% whole person, but I'm getting a 10% whole person, I'm going to start going through each one of these 13 different methods to see what other thing the doctor may have considered, or maybe there's something else coming into play, such as loss of motion or a strength deficit or something like that, or arthritis. These 13 different methods are nice to have in the back of your mind, or even just to pull this up. So when you're looking at a doctor's report, you can kind of go through and see which boxes to tick off, which methods are applicable, knowing that most of them are not combinable. There are some instances where you would combine one method with another, but you have to look at table 17-2 to know for sure which of those are combinable. And then yet again, and I'm only talking about ortho today just because we don't have the luxury of time. I could sit here and do probably 8 hours on the whole orthopedic system, just those chapters alone, but we're going to be very succinct today in what we're looking at. As far as the spine is concerned, they don't really have a table 17-1 or a figure 16-1A and B. They kind of have thrown us to the different tables and said, go for it, figure it out. But it's important for you to kind of know what you're trying to figure out with the help of some resources. And box 15-1 on page 382 of the guides is really helpful because it gives you the definitions of the different criteria, the different findings that are found within the DRE categories. So they'll give you the definition of guarding and spasm and asymmetry of motion and radiculopathy. But they also provided us, which I love this because it just helped everything kind of gel for me when I was first learning the guides, which was many moons ago. It was 4th edition, back when I did Longshore and Harbor Workers Act. So looking at, these different things within the guides themselves, after you get bored by the narrative components, sometimes the tables are more interesting, and these are helpful to you because you guys are not doctors, you're not nurses, if you are, awesome, thank you for attending my training, but I believe most of the folks on here are trying to get their continuing ed done before the end of June. So if you think about your role as a claims person, as I did when I first started out in claims, I seriously thought they hired the wrong person for the job because I thought, did they think I was like a pre-med student or pre-law, or that I have a degree in kinesiology? I don't know anything about anatomy and physiology, and they're telling me to look at a medical report. So I had the benefit of working at Sharp Healthcare in San Diego for about 5 years, and then beyond that, since that time, for about 25 years, I've gotten to have doctors at my fingertips to tell me different things about the body and how it works, as well as draw me pictures of certain things. So I throw you into this table and the next one because these tables, one's a figure, one's a table. Table 15-2 and figure 15-1 and 2 are helpful when you don't know anything about anatomy. What it does for you in the spine, and this is why I'm spending so much time on it, talking about it, because I think it's very helpful and will be like very beneficial to you down the road. It tells you what nerve root does what job. So you can figure out, is this radiculopathy? Is it not radiculopathy? Does this gel with the MRI findings? What's going on here? So when you look at, let's say the S1 nerve root, it's going to tell you that there could be a motor deficit problem in the ankle plantar flexors. You're going to see diminished sensation, sensory problems in the posterior leg or lateral foot, and the person may have lost an ankle reflex. So if you're more of a visual, like draw me a picture type person, I would say I kind of learn all different ways. I have to look and read too to further solidify it, but seeing a picture such as what we see in figure 15-1 tells you and shows you, okay, the S1 nerve root goes down the outside of the leg, down the ankle, into the pinky toe. Okay, we're seeing what that nerve does to what part of the lower extremities. Same for the cervical spine. So if somebody has a C6 nerve root problem, look at figure 15-2. You may find cooperative complaints or findings in that thumb, down the arm into the thumb. That is helpful to you because you're not having to try and guess. You're really trying to be more analytical in how you're looking at that doctor's report and seeing if that assignment of impairment is supported. And I'm just kind of giving you like a glimpse into what we do at iRatings. I don't review as many medical reports as I used to. I spend a lot of my time traveling and doing this type of webinar training section. Okay, somebody just asked a question, do they have the guides online or do we have to have the book? You do have to have the book. It's published by the American Medical Association, so they want a piece of the pie, like you can get it on Amazon. You should have it. They do have an e-version of it that you can buy. just keep in mind that they are selling it to doctors. So on a claims adjuster level, as far as budget is concerned, just know they're charging doctor prices for these books. So be aware of that. Okay, so back to impairment calculation. Knowing that you've probably already looked at that assignment of impairment, just kind of looked at, hey, lumbar strain, 5 to 8%. Oh no, the doctor said it's 13%. Let me look and see how the doctor got to this conclusion. And we see that, you know, some doctors provide a detailed analysis and other doctors just skimp and just tell you to guess how they got there. That report could be considered to be not substantial medical evidence. They need to provide a step-by-step basis for how they got to their final assignment of impairment. So an example would be, let's go with cervical strain, no history of surgery. This is, let's say, a doctor's report we're looking at. Patient complains of residual bilateral upper extremity radiculopathy. It's dermatomal, meaning the person's saying, oh, I got pain in my neck going down my arm into both my thumbs, but there's no findings on exam like sensory or motor deficits. The electrodiagnostic studies are negative. This would be a DRE2, 5 to 8% whole person. How do we get there? You might have said 0, but it's non-dermatomal. It is dermatomal pain with no findings on exam. So the fact the person has pain complaints in their neck, going down their arm into their thumb is suggestive of C6 nerve root problem. So we go ahead and buy that for $1, and whether we take them up to an 8% depends on impact of ADLs. So here we are looking at the California Permanent Disability Rating Schedule. Oh, somebody just said it's $200 on Amazon. We're still talking about the book. We'll do question and answer time too. The 5th edition is what you need. But at the very end, we'll answer some of these questions. California Permanent Disability Rating Schedule. I think I do. I have this. I have one. If you can see me on camera, I have one. It's kind of like it's almost becoming a relic, because a lot of the law firms used to print these and hand them out at conferences, but you can get it online. So you can get that online for free from the DWC website. So I have one downloaded, but I also sometimes I like to flip through it. I like to look at different jobs that they have in here, just to humor myself. So let's look at what our schedule tells us. First of all, we know that we have that doctor's report, but that's not the end of the road, right? We have this whole person impairment language that now we have to turn into permanent disability language. So we see, okay, we're having to do something with this whole person impairment number, and that's what the regs tell us. That's what the schedule tells us. The impairment standard that we use, meaning the first number we get, that is the whole person impairment number assigned in the doctor's report. And sometimes you have to deconstruct the impairment rating. If the doctor went from, let's say it's an elbow and a wrist, and just combine them at the upper extremity level and then converted to whole person, you may have to see, well, what's the upper extremity whole person impairment for the wrist and what is it for the elbow, because those are going to be stranded out separately. And then we change, when I say stranded out, that's also vernacular for meaning that number is going to go up or down depending on, everybody gets diminished future earning capacity at the same level now, but DFEC, as well as occupation and age at the time of injury. So the standard ratings, the first number rating, always, always, always has to be expressed at the whole level. You have to combine multiple ratings of a body part or system at the regional level first, and then convert to whole person. So be aware of that. As we look at for example, a Mumford procedure with loss of motion in the shoulder, you would figure out the upper extremity impairment for loss of motion, figure it out for arthroplasty, which is 10% upper extremity, combine those two, and then convert to whole person, and then rate them out for age and occupation. So here is our example. We have somebody with that cervical spine. I took them all the way up to 8%. I'm going to say, like, the doctor's report said, oh, their ADLs are very impacted. They can't do X, Y, and Z because of their cervical problem. So we are going to go step by step through this. It's a good little primer for you if you haven't looked at the schedule in a while, if you haven't thought about it in a while, if you're brand new to the system. We have a wide range of people. We have almost 200 people on this call. So I'm going to go back to basics, which I never think is wrong. I think it's important. Sometimes we forget what we should know. So we're looking at the example of that 8% and figuring out how the heck did it become 14%. So let's go through it. The first thing is the impairment number, recognizing that we look at the schedule itself, and this is how they've broken it down. 15, that first number is going to be the chapter in which the rating was assigned, the whole person impairment rating. Then we have the region, so we're talking about the neck, the sub-method, the method, and the sub-method, okay? So we have our impairment number, and then we are going to take our impairment standard, which was that 8%, and apply it. The next thing we have to do is everybody's going to get bumped up. That 8%, that impairment standard is going to go up pretty much every time, I think, because we had Senate Bill 863, and it said everybody's going to have the same FEC, which would be 8. But if you just want to do simple math, you would multiply that 8% impairment standard by 1.4. So you can use the tables in the schedule, which the tables really, this is, I don't know why they numbered the pages the way they did. Well, maybe I guess. Anyway, when you see use tables in 2-6 to 2-7, that's the page numbers at the bottom of the schedule. So that 8% we see turned into an 11% permanent disability. Now we're going to do something with that, but first we have to know what the person's job was. In this situation, let's go with janitor, but oh my God, let me tell you, we have some good little occupations in here. There is literally so many occupations in this schedule that you could just spend probably half an hour just looking at them. But I want to say there's some occupations in here that no longer exist, and there's some occupations that are not in here that now exist. The one I like is the acrobat one, and I like that because we actually look at Cirque du Soleil cases, so that applies. We have a cable car operator. Well, I guess that would apply to San Francisco. A broom stitcher, a bucker. I don't even know what a bucker is. A butter maker. Ooh, a dog catcher. But don't we call that animal control person now? So you'll see there's a lot of fun ones in here. A horseshoer. We still have those. So anyway, drop in the question. Tell me the weirdest job you've ever seen on any of your cases, because I love asking people what they do for a living on airplanes. And I've learned there's so many occupations out there I never knew existed. And it's quite intriguing. But let's go with our simple janitor scenario on this. 340 is going to be our group number. So that group number is signifying, the arduousness of the job, and maybe, what level, pretty much, let's just go with the arduousness of the job, the difficulty of it. How difficult is it? The higher you go, the more arduous it is for all intents and purposes. You may go, well, why is a vice investigator 490 and a janitor is only 340? Well, 490 is like a peace officer. So, vice investigator, you may have to take people down or something like that. So we are taking our little janitor guy, and we are going to figure out what variant, what letter of the alphabet that 340 equates to for a spine condition. So I don't know how they created this. I don't really need to know. I just know it's there, so I use it because I'm required to. But they, in their infinite wisdom, they being the state, the people that do the schedule, said, okay, a janitor or somebody in a 340 occupation gets a G, because this is what we think impacts, the cervical spine impacts this person in this way. So they get a G. Now I want you to remember this one piece that's super important. Don't make that assumption for all body parts. If we take a shoulder impairment number and look at 340, it might be an F or it might be an H. So don't ever assume that it's the same across, that your variant is going to be the same across the board. So you'll see what I mean in a minute, because we then go to our adjustment table within the schedule, and I can pull mine back out again. So we look at that G and see what it does to the standard rating, or to the impairment rating standard of 11% that we adjusted from the 8%, to see that that 11% turns into a 13%. So look on page 5-2 of the schedule, and you'll see the start of this table, the occupational adjustment table that I'm talking about. So looking at that 13%, we recognize now we're going to do something to that 13%. It's going to change once again. It's like you're waving your rating wand over this 8% number to see what it's going to be at the end. So apparently I'm past my prime. I am 52, and I'd be even in the next box over. If you have somebody who's 42 or older, that rating is always going to go up. If they're under 37, it's going to go down. So the idea being that their situation, their condition, their rating, the older you get, the harder it is, I guess. So we have that 8% that became 11%, that then became 13%, now turn into a 14% permanent disability rating. Hopefully, and drop me an emoji if this makes sense. Please ask questions. I'm saving time at the end for it to make sense to you if you do have questions, because I want you to walk away with knowledge today. So just in a recap, this is what this algebraic equation means. This is what these different numbers mean, and this is how we got to that 14%. Now, I also can tell you, if you're new in the system, when I first saw the rating thing, this algebraic thing, I thought, oh no, they thought I was good at math. They didn't do, back in 30 years ago, they didn't do like math tests and personality tests or anything like that. They just like, okay, you have a degree, you're a warm body, we'll throw you into the fire of handling 300 claims without training until 3 months down the road. So I don't want you to automatically bristle at seeing this equation. I hope what you do, it's not even an equation, it's an impairment rating strand. When you look at it, I hope that these different in between the dash marks make sense to you of what they mean. Every single one of these pieces has a meaning, and that's how we get to our last component of permanent disability. Now, there are some things to be aware of, and if you never read the fine print within the schedule, that's maybe an important thing to do, because there's some little good pieces of information in there. They talk about the fact that if all the ratings are combined at the whole person impairment scale and adjusted and then combined to determine an overall disability rating, it can't exceed that value. It can't go greater than if the body part were completely amputated or non-existent. Another piece that I get questions, at least let's go with once a month now, on is this 3% add-on for pain. Do you add it on to the end after you've done the strand rating for everything? Or do you add it up above before you strand it out for age and occupation? Here's what I want you to think about. That 3% is in whole person impairment language. So it wouldn't make sense to add it at the end in permanent disability language. So you do it at the beginning and then strand it out for age and occupation. So if a person has a shoulder problem, and let's say their rating's 10% whole person, you add the 3% to the 10, then strand out 13% for shoulder, other, or shoulder, range of motion, or whatever it may be. So it's not at the end, it's always before you strand it out because it's in whole person impairment language. So I have about 9 minutes, but I do want to answer any questions you have, and then I have a couple of closing remarks. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to try to make sure I've gotten all the questions. Okay, I do want to talk about the fact that the doctors, as I mentioned earlier, that they are incorrect 80% of the time. 80% of the time. So what does that mean to you? That means that you need to pay attention to it, because when we look at an impairment rating that is wrong, you have different strategies you can employ to make it your situation improve on your case. So I want to challenge you to be aware and to know what at least the basic conditions assigned impairment ratings are. So, you know, for example, lumbar strain, 5 to 8%. Carpal tunnel, I'm going to ask you a question now if anybody can tell me what they think they would expect in a doctor's report for carpal tunnel syndrome. Go ahead and put that in the questions. I see also, by the way, somebody, Sarah, thank you, posted the link for the permanent disability rating schedule online, DWC's website. And then let me get down here. I'm going to come back up.
Leslie, there was a question, and they said, do they
I want
have
to make
the
this bigger. How do I make it big? I wish I could make it bigger.
Can't make it bigger.
Yes, what was the question? Okay, cool.
So somebody had a question. They said they have the 5th edition guide of the AMAs. Do they need to replace that and get a more current version?
No, this is my book I use. Look at it. This is what we're using in California. If you're doing work in Longshore, if you're doing work in, let's say, Montana or Arizona or something like that, you want the purple book, which is like half the, it's like a quarter of the size of this book. So no, this is your book. This is what you want to use. Okay, let's see what other questions we got. Let's see, question 1 about page 39. When to use table 16-U2 to convert to hand upper extremity, and then do a second conversion from UEI to whole person. What if this happens? Okay, let's go back up. When to use, well, oh, okay. So we're going to go in the upper extremity chapter, table 16-2, and I can't see who asked the question because I scrolled down. Okay, so you will do, if you, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, when do you use 16-2 to convert to the hand and to upper extremity and then to whole person? So here's what you do is, if you will go to figure 16-1A and B, it tells you when to convert. So for example, let's say you have multiple digits involved, right? So you're going to go through the process of rating each digit, and then you're going to add you're going to convert each digit to hand, then add those values for each of the digits hand assigned impairment. You're going to add them at the hand level, then you're going to convert to upper extremity, and then the whole person. So it's always going to be a like for like. Okay, page 509, many strength evaluations are age-based, but the age of table 16-32 stops at 59. What happens to older and under workers? Bring the strength down based on, this thing keeps scrolling. Okay, let's go to the strength discussion. Bring the strength down based on the averages of age. Okay, so let me just say, you should very rarely have impairment based on strength deficit, because there's four different things that automatically knock it out of you being able to do it, which is pain, which almost all these people have, loss of motion, a derangement of a body part or system like an amputation. And when we look at the page 492, yeah, you're right. It does, you know, these older injured workers, it's kind of like we would look at what is reasonable for an individual with respect to, you know, their opposite side. So if you're dealing with somebody with a unilateral injury, I would want to see what their opposite side is showing me as far as strength ability, because chances are their strength on their uninjured side compared to their contralateral side is probably going to be similar if they're very significantly mature in their aging process. So like, for example, as well, like shoulder measurements, you know, my 82-year-old mother-in-law, I point back there because she lives with me, you know, can only do so much range of motion, but she also injured her other side. But really, when I look at her ranges of motion for her left side that's uninjured to the right side, they're really not that far off. That's just kind of how it is for her 82-year-old body. Then there's another question we have. How to properly rate muscle strength for upper extremity and lower extremity. Okay. Okay. So they tell you in the book how to do it. So let's say you're trying to determine strength deficit. It's a very simple test, and I'm not a doctor, but I may play one on TV someday. You're going to push against resistance, and that's how the doctor figures out if there's any kind of strength deficit. Same thing for lower extremities. Let's say somebody, you know, they think you might have quadriceps deficit. They're going to have you push against resistance in order to see if you have strength deficit. It's very subjective, so we don't give a lot of weight to it. There's usually a more reliable method. What are your thoughts of the necessity? Gosh, who is out asking? I got to see who's asking these questions. The Master the AMA Guides 5th edition for the day-to-day of an attorney versus a professional rater. I think that's a good, I think it's a good little supplemental book to have. I think better yet is the Guides Casebook, which gives you, it's like a little recipe book that gives you like multiple different scenarios across the board between the internal conditions and the orthopedic conditions, to see different scenarios, much like it expands on the examples given in here. The Guides Casebook's kind of like it's a lot. I can't say it's a Cliff Notes version, but it is helpful, especially if you're an attorney. I think it's helpful. But the Guides Casebook is probably my next best thing I would go to. Okay. Let's see. I love this. This person's a nerd like me, I think, that's asking all these questions, because they are not the questions of an average bear. Okay, let's see what else we got. Any other questions, Diane? Let's see. And are there any in the chat? Okay. I think I've answered almost everything. I want to see. Okay, next one.
So
okay,
here, somebody says, you mentioned the Elmer's Guzman, which is a different training. Where does she sign up for the webinar on that?
Yeah, we could, let's do it. Let's do it, Diane. Okay. Or I can do it for your, if you have a claims office, Diane and I could collaborate and do it for your office. We always appreciate the opportunity to do training in, you know, one organization, but this is just a great way to get it out there. The one I wanted to look, I was scrolling up because I wanted to hear the weirdest job, and somebody said it wasn't really a job. It was a prisoner who's volunteering. Yeah, that happens. I even was talking to the county, one of the counties we work with, and they had a guy that was mopping the floor, a prisoner, and he slipped and fell, and that was a work-related claim, believe it or not. So lots of interesting, a lot of Wrangler. Oh, somebody had a Wrangler.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a jellyfish wrangler, which is
In the
interesting. Who knew?
oh,
Who knew? Learn
I
so much
know.
when you Growing Friends webinars.
Is that maybe a lifeguard? I don't know. Lots of interesting facts. So I'm gonna about wrap it up, I think. Ooh, okay, can I just do my closing?
Let's talk about the slide.
Okay, so right now, I mean, Diane and I do a podcast called White Knuckling Through Life, and it really is my favorite podcast, but it's been on hiatus and we need more content. So if you have a story to tell us or something interesting that shows, or you know someone that has demonstrated resilience in their life despite the challenges life has thrown at you, please hit us up, and we would love to have that person as a guest. But I binge Smartlist because it's super funny. I don't listen to all of them. When they get the political people on, I kind of go away from that. I don't like it. But they mostly have like chefs, celebrity chefs, stars, musicians, people, authors, things like that. And they're super fun. Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett, and they're super funny. So that is my favorite podcast right now. And then before I wrap it up, I always like to just leave you with a quote and give you something hopeful. Also to remind you to be kind to yourself. It's very important to me that I use my platform to just spread that little piece of it, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Yes, you are on here for a training, for your work job, for your profession, but beyond that, you're a human being. You're a mom, you're a dad, you're a wife, you're an aunt, you're a dog mom, cat mom, dad, whatever you want to, wherever you want to place yourself. So we're all human beings. So let's think about this quote that Miss Maya Angelou gave us. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I leave you with that, and I'll pass it on over to Diane for closing comments.
All right. Well, thank you, Leslie. You always give us a wealth of information, and we do appreciate that. I would like to say that we have a very interesting, just happenstance, the way it turned out for our last webinar. Our last webinar is going to be on the 26th of June. And what we have is we have a group of applicant copy services that are going to come and talk about copy services from their perspective. Well, I just got today inquiry from an attorney that wants to talk about how to manage applicant attorneys' requests for records. So I think the two of them are going to be perfect together. You're going to have one at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you have the other one at 1:30. So please sign up for that. It's on the Macro Pro and Friends. There are other great topics. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we certainly are very, very proud that we can help you with your education hours. Thank you, Leslie, for helping our friends get their CEUs together. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.